Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Empowering Minds Mental Health Podcast. I am your host, Jennifer Moore, and today I have Meera with me. She is a 16-year-old who is doing great and amazing things to help with mental health through her website and social media. Meera will talk about her own struggles with depression and anxiety, and then she'll discuss the challenges that teens deal with today, such as school stress and the pressure to be productive. And she'll also give some helpful tips on how to balance high school expectations with taking care of your mental health. So, this episode is for students, parents, and anyone who cares about supporting young people in their mental health. All right, so let's get into this chat with Meera. All right. So, good morning to you, and thank you for agreeing to come on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome. All right. So, question one. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey with depression and anxiety and what led you to start Resilience Mental Health?
Yeah, so I'll just preface this by saying I've been in therapy for the last 2 years and very consistently for the last 10 months. So I've had a very strong support system around me. But I was diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression around January of this year. But
Mhm,
I've probably struggled with both a lot since the middle of seventh grade. I'm a junior now, and really bad anxiety since sixth grade. I hit rock bottom around December to March of last year. I was struggling to eat. I was getting like 4 hours of sleep. I was struggling deeply with things like self-harm and suicidal ideation, and I just had no motivation to do anything. But through consistent therapy, I was able to get out of this really dark place and
mhm,
get the motivation to start recovery. So now, while there are still times where I feel that I'm on the edge of relapse and I'm still struggling, I'm honestly the happiest I've felt in years, and I've been clean from things like self-harm for the longest time since I started struggling with it. And this all led to me wanting to start Resilience Mental Health at the end of last summer. I wanted to bring awareness to two main things. So, first was harmful productivity culture. I live in a really hyper competitive school district that there's this
mhm,
constant pressure to succeed. But second, I realized that there isn't a lot of information about things like coping mechanisms, and I
mhm.
found a lot of healthier ways to deal with my emotions. So, I really wanted to bring attention to those things.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your story. Your story shows resilience. And of course, I'm a whole lot older than you, but I wish that when I was your age, there were more resources available. I also wished when I was your age that mental health was something that was really talked about. It was frowned upon. And so even though we did have some resources, a lot of us, we didn't tap into them because of the stigmas around mental health. So I want to thank you for your resilience. All right. So my next question. What do you think are some of the root causes of mental health struggles among teenagers today?
Yeah, so great question. I think there's two main things I see. So the first thing is just there's an insane amount of pressure to be a certain way and fill a certain path to success. So the high school that I go to, I see fifth graders worrying about what college they're going to get into and what grades they're going to get. And it's just creating this constant culture where kids aren't learning to live and have fun. They're learning to measure their value by their grades. And I think this, when kids feel like, oh, I can't achieve this or this isn't who I want to be, this then creates a ton of stress that can then turn into things like depression and anxiety. But I think on top of that, there's also the rise of access to technology. Like when you have second graders addicted to YouTube shorts, like you're first of all going to be reliant on getting things like constant bursts of dopamine, which can leave you really stressed out when you're a school environment and can't get those constant bursts of dopamine. But second, you're getting exposure to things that aren't just right for you at a young age. And when you have all these things bombarding you, this pressure, this technology, all this information, it just becomes really easy to fall into this dark hole where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm
Hmm.
trying to achieve, and just becoming so stressed out. So I think those are definitely the main root causes.
Gotcha. And I didn't share this with you before, but I worked in a public school system, I think about 12 13 years total. And you
Hmm.
are absolutely right. Especially, I can remember the older, like fourth to fifth grade students, but mainly fifth grade students, they were really stressed out. I mean, I get where you want to learn and excel and you want to learn the practical part of your educational programming, but they would stress themselves out so much. It was like they were in competition with their peers. If their peer made 100, they want to make 105, and they really were stressing themselves out. And I thought, gosh, that is a lot on their brain. Their brains are still developing, but they were very, very stressed. And so one year they bought in a mental health group, and they would come in like on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they would teach strategies about like coping skills and how to manage. But yeah, that is a real thing. You really see it in elementary school, how stressed they are. All
Yeah.
right. So, with that being said, how do you manage your mental health while balancing the pressures of being a competitive debater on a national level, and you're also the editor of your school's newspaper?
Yeah, so I definitely think that it comes down to how you prioritize. So one of the
Yeah.
biggest things I've seen between me last year and me this year was last year I was so obsessed with my productivity and I measured my entire self-worth by like academic validation. But as a result, like I was straight up miserable, right? Like I was getting 4 hours of sleep because I was constantly studying. And I've realized that yes, my things like my academics are really important and I want to continue working hard. But those things don't matter more than me prioritizing myself and my mental health. So, for example, this year, the way I've learned to structure things is like, okay, getting 8 hours of sleep a night, that's something I'm not willing to sacrifice. Taking
Mm-hmm.
breaks, things I'm not willing to sacrifice. And then I try to schedule things around that instead of scheduling my sleep around my other commitments. So, yeah, I do feel the pressure to be a good debater, but I'm learning that that pressure doesn't mean I stop caring about myself. That
Mm-hmm.
pressure means I care about myself, and then I also try to put in an hour a day into doing debate. And I try to put into an hour a day to make sure I'm studying and keeping my grades up.
Mm-hmm.
And when I feel like I'm too overwhelmed, I try to reevaluate and be like, really, do I need to be committed to 1,700 clubs now? Like, probably not. So I'm trying to create a better plan for things like time management, etc. So I think realizing those things has really helped me to reprioritize my mental health and balance pressure. I definitely still struggling with this, but I've just developed a much better mindset, and that's allowed me to build good time management skills, realizing that,
Mm-hmm.
my high school years aren't everything there is to life. Like I have so much ahead of me. So just putting all those things together and framing this healthier mindset has definitely helped me get ahead.
That's good. I'm so glad that you are prioritizing your self-care and your wellness first, like you said, with sleep. I mean, even at as an adult, if I don't get the right amount of sleep, I'm telling it's like I crash.
Yeah.
No time management, no structure, and as you know, all that stuff turns into like burnout and you're overwhelmed. So I'm very proud of you for prioritizing yourself first and then things around it. All right. So, what are some misconceptions about depression and anxiety that you think need to be addressed, especially for younger generations?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of misconceptions, and a lot of it tends to be around like how we view like what happens and the root causes. So,
Hmm.
first of all, I think when it comes to depression, I think that there's this conception that like, oh, it's easy to tell that people are depressed because their grades are going to fall, they're going to do really bad in everything, and that's just a huge signifier. But
Hmm.
for me, I was so obsessed with productivity that I kept my GPA really high, and even though I was struggling a lot because I valued my grades on top, my grades were pretty high. But I think as a result, it became a lot harder to recognize that, like, wait, my mindset was really unhealthy, and the way I was structuring things was really unhealthy. Like, just because you're getting results in the short term doesn't mean that it's healthy for you in the long term. And I think those things need to be addressed as the root causes, as things like depression. But secondly, I think alongside depression, I think self-harm is something that is really misunderstood. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's viewed as something that, like, oh, people just do this as a result of self-hate. But in reality, self-harm is something that's like really, really addictive, and it's often a method of releasing stress because
Mm-hmm.
when you harm yourself, it actually releases cortisol. So I think addressing this can be really key because when I learned that and I was having discussions with my therapist about this, I realized that, like, wait, I need to find better coping mechanisms to things like stress. I need to learn how to channel my energy into maybe going for a walk or
Mm-hmm.
reading a book instead of turning to these negative coping mechanisms. And I think that's something that we don't always tend to have the resources for. Like, we try to tell people, like, oh, just like try to be less stressed out. But I think really having a core set of coping
Yeah.
mechanisms is really, really important. Yeah, so I think those are probably the main misconceptions that come for these main things.
All right. So again, I am very proud of you. You said a lot of key things. You said I'm in therapy. I've been consistent. So you have placed some coping skills in your life to help you manage. So even though you are a teen now, these coping skills that you're learning now are going to help you as you continue your journey into adulthood. And so when teens come on later to view this podcast, I hope that that is what they will take away, learning coping skills to take them through their adulthood. And so that was all of my questions I had for you today, but I want to leave the floor with you. Do you have any resonating thoughts that you want to leave with the viewers who will watch this later on?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things to just keep in mind is that, especially for teens today, is like, okay, let's say you're putting all your effort to try to get into a good college. It doesn't matter if you get into that good college if you're burnt out and you're struggling and you're tired by the time that you get there.
Hmm.
I think we really need to reframe how we view, like, the fact that you care for yourself and you put these skills towards yourself in the short term, they really matter, and they matter more than anything else. And I really, really want teens to keep that in mind and to remember to prioritize themselves and to remember that being quote unquote productive and getting good grades and doing everything amazingly,
Hmm.
not really like the coolest thing in the world, right? It doesn't matter if you're unhappy, and those things like prioritizing self-care, maybe that's what we should view as productive.
Yeah.
So I think just I would love people to keep that in mind going forward.
Okay. And also, correct me if I'm wrong. I think I read either, do you have a podcast? Your own
No,
personal podcast? A
no.
website?
Yeah, I have a website and like I post videos on social media.
Okay, that's what I thought. Do you want to share that information with people as well? Maybe they can follow your social media following, kind of, tap in with you.
Yeah, sure. So on Instagram, I'm under Resilience Mental Health. And if you want to follow that, that would be amazing. You can find links to my website on that page and find different videos about coping mechanisms, prioritizing yourself, and lots of resources.
Okay. All right. So I'll link that information and I'll be in contact with you soon. Okay.
Okay,
All
thank you.
right. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope you have a great day.
You too. Thank
Take
you.
care. All right. Bye bye.